The sterile air of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport hadn't quite left my lungs as I pulled into the driveway of my house. The familiar silhouette of the modern two-story, with its large windows and sleek lines, should have been a welcoming sight, a beacon of comfort after a grueling 10-day business trip to Tokyo. Instead, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The porch lights blazed like runway markers, a stark contrast to my usual preference for darkness. My security sign, usually firmly planted in the meticulously manicured lawn, was conspicuously absent. A wave of apprehension washed over me as I fumbled for my keys, the metallic tang of worry coating my tongue. The key slid into the lock, but stubbornly refused to turn. I jiggled it, applied more pressure, but nothing. This was wrong. Terribly wrong. I never left the porch lights on, and the missing security sign was a clear indication that something was amiss. Taking a deep breath, I moved closer to the large picture window, shielding my eyes to peer inside. A wave of shock crashed over me. Movement. Laughter. Voices. My house, my sanctuary, was occupied. My heart pounded in my chest as I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing like a death knell in the still night air. The door swung open to reveal a teenager, a blonde, smirking, youth radiating an air of smug entitlement. He was wearing my hoodie, a detail that sent a jolt of incandescent anger through me. Behind him, in my foyer, stood a woman who instantly triggered every alarm bell in my system. She was the epitome of a certain stereotype, a Karen personified. Mid-50s, with a severe bob haircut, a perfectly coordinated sweater set, and eyes that could bore holes through steel. She held a cup of tea, her posture suggesting she had every right to be there, that she owned the very ground beneath her feet. She looked at me, not with surprise, not with fear, but with cold, unwavering disdain, as if I were the one who had intruded upon her. The audacity of her gaze was staggering. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice tight with controlled fury. She met my gaze without flinching. "This is my home," she declared, her tone laced with an almost comical level of indignation. "I moved 2 weeks ago under a verbal agreement with the landlord." The sheer absurdity of her statement rendered me speechless for a moment. "I am the landlord," I finally managed to choke out, my voice laced with disbelief. "I'm the owner. This is my house." I pulled out my wallet, brandishing my ID, then fumbled for my phone, displaying a digital copy of the deed. "Here's my ID. Here's proof of ownership. Get out of my house." Her response was a derisive scoff, a sound that perfectly encapsulated her contempt. "Anyone can fake documents," she sneered, her eyes narrowing even further. "I'm calling the police." And with that, she turned her back on me and dialed 911, her voice dripping with false urgency as she reported a suspicious individual attempting to break into her home. The air crackled with tension as we waited for the authorities to arrive. The teenager, who I later learned was named Bryce, added fuel to the fire with his crude and hateful remarks. He called me boy, a racial slur that ignited a firestorm of anger within me. "Go back where you came from," he sneered, his face twisted with malice. He even had the gall to point to the front lawn and declare, "You look better out there anyway." I clenched my fists, struggling to maintain my composure. The level of blatant racism was shocking, even in this day and age. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to unleash my fury. But I knew that would only play into their hands. I had to remain calm, rational, and let the law handle this situation. The minutes stretched into an eternity as we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The arrival of the police, 2 patrol cars pulling up with flashing lights, brought a sense of relief, but also a renewed wave of anxiety. Karen immediately launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar, bursting into tears and claiming that I was a deranged squatter threatening her and her disabled son. Disabled? The same kid who had just threatened to tase me if I didn't get off their porch? The blatant lies were infuriating, but I held my tongue, allowing the officers to assess the situation. Calmly and methodically, I presented my case, handing over my ID, proof of ownership, and the login credentials for my security camera system. I explained that I had been out of the country on a business trip and had returned to find my house occupied. I directed them to the footage of Karen and Bryce breaking in through the back sliding door, carrying bags and boxes. They had even unplugged the cameras after 5 minutes, naively believing that would erase the cloud backup. It didn't. The officer played the clip, the damning evidence displayed on his body cam screen. Karen's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Before my eyes, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. She sputtered and stammered, desperately trying to concoct a new narrative, but the evidence was irrefutable. However, the unraveling of Karen's scheme was far from over. As the officers were questioning her, dispatch received a call from a neighboring precinct, a call that added another layer of complexity to this already bizarre situation. Apparently, Karen and her son were already under investigation for pulling a nearly identical stunt on another homeowner, an elderly veteran, just 3 months prior. The modus operandi was the same. The owner left town, Karen moved in, played the victim, and evaded charges by claiming mental distress. It was a pattern of calculated deception, a cynical exploitation of the legal system. But this time, things were different. This time, I had irrefutable evidence, and the authorities were already aware of her past transgressions. One of the officers whispered something into his radio, and soon, reinforcements arrived. Code enforcement and a county investigator appeared, their presence signaling that this was more than just a simple case of trespassing. They began a thorough search of the house, their professional eyes scanning every nook and cranny. What they discovered was even more shocking than I could have imagined. Karen had transformed my house into an illegal Airbnb operation. While I was in Tokyo, she had started listing rooms on the platform, using my address and pocketing the profits. She had bookings lined up for the next 2 weeks, with towels folded on guest beds and little chocolate mints placed as a welcoming touch. Bryce, in his infinite wisdom, had even spray-painted over the garage camera in a pathetic attempt to conceal their illegal activity. The audacity of their actions was breathtaking. It was a brazen violation of my property, my privacy, and my peace of mind. The police informed them that they had to pack their belongings and leave immediately. Karen, predictably, refused. She launched into a tirade, spouting nonsensical legal jargon and claiming that she had sovereign citizen rights. I didn't even bother to engage. I simply stood there, a silent observer to the unfolding drama, as the wheels of justice began to turn. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more surreal, Animal Control arrived, their truck pulling up to the curb with flashing lights and a chorus of barking emanating from within. Apparently, Karen was harboring 3 unlicensed Pomeranians, hiding them away in my pantry. The discovery of the clandestine canine operation added a layer of absurdity to the already chaotic scene. The irony was not lost on me. She had accused me of being a squatter, yet she was the one illegally occupying my house and running an unlicensed business, complete with a hidden pack of yapping dogs. As the animal control officers attempted to wrangle the Pomeranians, one of them nipped an officer, drawing blood and escalating the situation further. Bryce, perhaps sensing that the jig was finally up, decided to make a desperate escape attempt. He bolted out the front door, his legs pumping furiously as he tried to outrun the authorities. Fate, however, had other plans. In his haste, he tripped over my Roomba, the robotic vacuum cleaner, sending him sprawling headfirst into my glass coffee table. The table shattered into a million pieces, and Bryce lay motionless on the floor, knocked out cold. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers as the officers rushed to his side. Karen, witnessing her son's dramatic downfall, let out a blood-curdling scream. She continued to rant about sovereign citizen rights while being cuffed and led away, her wig falling off mid-scream, revealing a bald patch beneath. Bryce, still unconscious, was loaded onto a stretcher and taken away, drool trickling down his chin. I stood in my yard, surrounded by flashing lights, police officers, barking dogs, and the wreckage of my broken furniture, shaking my head in disbelief. It was like a scene from a particularly bizarre movie, a dark comedy infused with elements of racism, greed, and incompetence. As I watched them being dragged away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. They had underestimated me, and their arrogance had ultimately led to their downfall. Finally, with the police escort, I re-entered my sanctuary, now turned crime scene. The house was in shambles. My belongings were strewn everywhere, rearranged by the unwanted guests who had invaded my life. The air hung heavy with the stench of cheap perfume, dog urine, and the lingering residue of chaos. It was a daunting task to begin the process of reclaiming my home, but with each step, I felt a sense of resolve growing within me. The first order of business was to secure the property. I changed the locks, upgraded the security system, and installed even more cameras, ensuring that no one would ever be able to breach my defenses again. Then, I began the arduous task of cleaning up the mess. I hired a professional cleaning crew to sanitize the house, remove the lingering odors, and restore order to the chaos. I spent hours sorting through my belongings, discarding anything that had been damaged or contaminated by the intruders. It was a cathartic process, a way of purging the negative energy that had permeated my home. As I worked, I couldn't help but reflect on the events of the past few weeks. I had been targeted because of my race, my success, and my perceived vulnerability. Karen and Bryce had seen me as an easy mark, someone they could exploit for their own gain. But they had underestimated my resilience, my determination, and my unwavering belief in justice. I vowed to use this experience as a catalyst for growth, to become even more vigilant in protecting myself and my community. I decided to connect with other homeowners in the neighborhood, sharing my story and urging them to take proactive steps to safeguard their properties. I also reached out to local organizations that fight against racism and hate crimes, offering my support and resources. I knew that healing from this trauma would take time, but I was determined to emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. The police investigation into Karen and Bryce's activities continued. I provided them with all the necessary evidence, including the security camera footage, the Airbnb listings, and the testimonies of my neighbors. I learned that they were facing a multitude of charges, including trespassing, fraud, operating an illegal business, and hate crimes. I was confident that they would be held accountable for their actions. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I focused on rebuilding my life and reclaiming my peace of mind. I spent more time with my friends and family, reconnecting with the people who brought joy and laughter into my life. I also made a conscious effort to engage in activities that nourished my soul, such as hiking in the mountains, attending cultural events, and volunteering in my community. I realized that true healing came from within, from cultivating a sense of gratitude, compassion, and self-acceptance. I forgave myself for any perceived mistakes I had made, and I learned to trust my instincts more fully. I also sought professional help, talking to a therapist who helped me process my emotions and develop healthy coping mechanisms. Through therapy, I was able to release the anger, fear, and resentment that had been weighing me down. I emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose and direction. I was determined to live my life to the fullest, to embrace every opportunity for growth and joy, and to never let the negativity of others dim my light. My house, once a symbol of violation and fear, gradually transformed back into a sanctuary, a place of comfort, security, and peace. I filled it with new furniture, artwork, and personal touches that reflected my unique style and personality. I planted a new security sign in the front yard, a silent declaration that I was in control of my own destiny. And as I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the Puget Sound, I knew that I had finally found peace again. The ordeal had tested me, challenged me, and ultimately made me stronger. I had emerged from the darkness with a renewed sense of hope and a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life. The incident with Karen and Bryce would always be a part of my story, but it would not define me. I was Elijah Monroe, a tech innovator, a homeowner, and a survivor. And I was ready to embrace whatever the future held for me.